Hi, welcome to the Paranormal Peep Show with our special on UAPs. And joining us tonight is Ben Emlyn-Jones, who's probably one of the best people to ask around locally in the UK to talk about these things. But I'll say hello to Andy Chaplin, our co-host. How are you, Andy?
Yeah, not bad, Neil. Yeah, let's get straight into it.
Okay, you're both looking very blue and vibrant. I feel I should have dressed up a little bit more for the occasion. I'm just wearing black, a little bit of purple, but you two are looking very colourful. So I feel rather underdressed for the occasion. But anyway, how are you, Ben? Thank you for joining us.
I'm fine, thanks, Neil. It's good to be here back on the Paranormal Peep Show. I've always enjoyed being on your shows, and it's a very interesting time period we're going through at the moment. Lots of things happening to talk about.
Oh, and you come with your own theme music, I hear.
Yes, my accompaniment is Alan, who lives upstairs. He is a pianist, and he's decided to start playing a piano. Sorry, ladies and gentlemen, nothing I can do about that. It's the flat above me. He has a piano, so there you are.
You could pretend that you've got Beethoven as your spirit guide or something.
Yeah,
That's
you're channeling.
Yeah. I think Beethoven would probably do a better job.
Yeah,
you're going to get all the angry people saying that's not Beethoven, that's Chopin, or whoever it is playing.
It's definitely channeling Liberace, I think. Yeah,
I nickname him Liberace.
Yeah, very appropriate, very appropriate. Does he play like late at night? Does it really sort of get on your nerves?
No, he'll stop actually in probably about half an hour. He'll probably stop
just as we finish recording.
Yeah, just in time. He tends to do that summer, not deliberately. I'm sure there's no way he could know when I'm recording, and even if he would disturb me deliberately, I don't know why that happens.
The thing about pianos, is it a real piano or an electric piano? Or?
It's a real one. He's got like a upright piano.
I was going to say, because you get headphones these days if they're electric pianos and things.
I did ask him about that, and he's headphones. He says that's actually an acoustic piano.
Oh well, never mind.
I don't know how he got it up there. I mean, the stairway is really
Lauren Hardy, I think.
Probably, yeah.
Man, it looks like you've not had much sleep. I don't know if he plays it at 3 o'clock in the morning or.
Oh, if he did, I would have a go at him, but luckily he doesn't.
Well, Ben has been very, very busy doing lots of live streams and lots of reports on these UAPs, which Andy and I discussed a few months ago. And Andy was bringing up the subject, saying about the fact that one of the last acts of President Trump before he went out of power was to try and get as much information released about UFOs as possible, or UAPs. So what is UAPs, Andy asked before we started. Can you confirm what that is, Ben?
Unidentified aerial phenomena. Now, that's another way of saying unidentified flying object, really, isn't it? So you wonder why they're using the term. Now, the reason is it's because UFO has a lot of societal baggage, doesn't it? It's associated with, well, people with tinfoil hats with cameras pointing at the sky, which people like us. And I think it's very ironic, actually, because the term UFO was introduced for the very same reason by the Robertson panel in 1952. They got fed up with the term flying saucer because it was associated with, as the aforementioned demographics. They said, let's come up with something new that's scientific and more staid and more governmental, so they came up with UFO. But of course, UFO now is in the same position as the old flying saucer, so they've got UAP now. However, I think that from what I've seen, the sort of new ufologists have kind of culturally appropriated UAP. So I think the government are going to have to come up with something new now. God knows what they'll choose, but they'll come up with something else.
I suppose it's a bit like conspiracy theory. I mean, there's nothing wrong with conspiracy theory, but it comes with so much baggage. People just think tinfoil hat, but there are plenty of conspiracy theories. If 3 mates of yours decide to rob a bank and plan it, that's a conspiracy. Yeah. And if the police think that you're going to do it, but they can't really prove it as yet, that's a theory.
Exactly, yes. And so there's a lot of weight is put onto the wordage we use, as George Orwell rightly said. And indeed, so this report, and indeed the UAPTF, the Unidentified Aerial Phenomenon Task Force, was arranged around that particular kind of language. And indeed, the report, which we're going to discuss, is a very interesting piece of work from a linguistic point of view, actually. The report was the one, as you said, 6 months of when Trump signed the bill, which was that the UAPTF would basically get a budget. It would have a budget in return for its charter, which was to publish every 6 months, to publish a public report on UFOs. Now, this is kind of quite remarkable. It was quite surprised me when this happened. This has never been done before. Even during Project Blue Book, there was never a mandate to inform the public on the subject of UFOs. yet UAPTF is. Now, the UAPTF is basically the same thing as ATIP. ATIP, the Advanced Aerial Threat Identification Program, it was revealed that existed in 2019. However, in 2011, the US government, interestingly, made a statement in response to a White House petition stating that they had no interest in UFOs. They had no organizations and no individuals employed to study it, and they hadn't since the Condon Report in 1969. This was a lie. The ATIP ran from 2007 to 2012. The UAPTF is simply ATIP under another name. They've moved ATIP basically from the Defense Intelligence Agency to the Pentagon, and they've changed its name. Basically, most of the personnel they just moved offices basically and rebranded. But now the report, obviously, there's been no secret over the fact that the UAPTF would also handle classified data. This is what's known as the Annex. That's the name that's been given. However, the public report, they have stuck by their commitment to release the public report. On the 25th of June, they did. And the report is a epic 9 pages. It's called a preliminary. I'll just have to open it.
I think they must have written over the weekend or something. You know?
It's something like that.
It's almost like school homework, isn't it?
Yeah, where was it? It's gone now.
So is it 9 pages and fully redacted?
Oh, it's I can't really find it now. Is it? No, I can't find it. For some reason, it's disappeared from where I had it.
That's a conspiracy theory.
It must be a conspiracy. It's a conspiracy. I'll just have to find it again. Hang on. But it's funny. It's not even. It's not even like 9 pages actually, because here it is. It's not even 9 pages. Because the first page is a title page, and the rest of it is the last 2 pages are appendices. So it's really 6 pages of real information. Right. Serious information is just six little pages. But anyway, it's what's interesting to read. It's very, very carefully worded, yet it's full of bad grammar. There's lots of bad grammar in it. Yeah. So the careful wordage has ignored things like that, and it's gone. The people have been so frightened about other things that they haven't really cared about that. Now, a lot of people are describing this as very disappointing indeed. And it is, I think, how disappointing you find it will depend on your expectations. I think it's pretty much where my expectations lie, maybe slightly better. I think maybe it's a net positive, this particular report. And it is titled The Preliminary Assessment, which means there's going to be more. And indeed, Steve Bassett published on the Paradigm Research Group today that there is going to be another report round about the 12th of July, which will contain more information. But what it says, the most interesting bit is page 5, because there's several clauses here which are very interesting. They basically go over it's all waffle apart really from page 5. It says a handful of UAP appear to demonstrate advanced technology. Wow. 18 incidents described in 21 reports. That's not a small number, and that's not a handful. 18 is not a handful. Some UAP appear to remain stationary in winds aloft. They move against the wind, maneuver abruptly, and move at considerable speed without discernible means of propulsion. Now, that is not a weather balloon. Balloons don't move against the wind. They don't remain stationary in a windy environment. In a small number of cases, military aircraft systems processed radio frequency energy associated with UAP sightings. Now, that means basically they are transmitting radiation of some form or another, and the aircraft's electronic support measures pick that up. And it says here again, UAP holds a small amount of data that appear to show UAP demonstrating acceleration or degree of signature management, which in other words, the way they're moving around. Additional rigorous analysis are necessary by multiple teams or groups of experts. We are conducting further analysis, etc., etc. Now, they've actually categorized UAPs into 5 different categories. The first is airborne clutter. That includes birds, balloons, airborne debris like plastic bags, and things like that. Natural atmospheric phenomena, ice crystals, moisture, thermal fluctuations, which cause, if not visual, but radar and infrared anomalies. US government or industry developmental programs. That is secret aircraft that have been developed, like the U-2 spy plane was in the 50s. and things like that, or the SR-71 Blackbird. There's it says we are unable to confirm that these systems accounted for any UAP reports we collected. Also, I should add to that if US governmental industrial development programs were in progress, and I'm sure they are, it's unlikely they'd be allowed near a US Navy carrier battle group with live fire capability. There may be reasons why they would, but it's not normal behavior to do that with secret aircraft, because they're not very secret then, are they? Foreign adversarial systems. This basically means the same thing as the above, except they're developed by a foreign nation or non-governmental entity. The two nations most commonly named are China and Russia, because they are kind of the alternative superpowers in this kind of tripolar world we're now living in. Now, that's a possibility that can't be ruled out. But the thing is, though, if that's the case, in this world of universal espionage of all kinds, why do the Americans not know about it? Why does the American intelligence not know about it? If really another nation advanced to that degree, because certainly nations can outdo each other technologically. In the Cold War, in the beginning of the space race, of course, was dominated by the Soviet Union. They built slightly better rockets, which were able to put a space satellite in space, Sputnik, and they put in Yuri Gagarin. This was a few months before the Americans were able to do so. Then the problem is what we're looking at here is a level of technology which is so much in advance of what we have now. Lou Elizondo describes aircraft without any propulsion, without any wings, without any propellers or jets, without any control surfaces. It's obviously working through some other means, and we know it's not an aerostat, it's not a balloon of any kind. So what's lifting it, what's propelling it? Now, it's almost like we're dealing with something we can't understand. It's like, I've seen videos of this actually, where people go into the jungles of New Guinea and they visit Stone Age tribes, and sometimes they'll show these people modern technology like a mobile phone or something, and these tribes look in wonder at this device. They don't see anything, they just see a box with lights on making funny noises, but they can't understand what it is, and we're a bit like that. Now, seriously, that kind of technological differential you won't find among developed Western nations. Now, then it starts getting really interesting and really strange, because the final category is other, and this is a masterful piece of linguistic manipulation here, because it says, although most of the UAP described in our data set probably remain unidentified due to limited data or challenges to collection, processing, or analysis, we may require additional scientific knowledge to successfully collect on, analyze, and characterize some of them. We would group such objects in this category pending scientific analysis that allowed us to better understand them. The UAPTF intends to focus additional analysis on the small number of cases where a UAP appeared to display unusual flight characteristics or signature management. This is a way of saying some of them are not only unexplained but inexplicable, and we don't know what they are. Now, no one wants to say the A word, though, do they? The closest anyone came to saying the A word was Senator Martin Heinrich. He was tackled basically in a street interview, and he was quite agreeable with the interview. And he did say, look, they're not, he actually did say it's far more likely that these are, he didn't say extraterrestrial. I can't remember what his exact word was, but he didn't want to say the A word, aliens. Now, at some point, what this report has essentially done is it's painted the whole issue into a corner, because there's no way really you can put this kind of statement out without people saying, oh, come on, look, why don't you just admit the most likely explanation is that these are some kind of artificial object of non-human construction? Why don't you just admit that? Because that is by far the most likely explanation, not just based on the UAPTF, but based on official and unofficial ufology dating back 75 years. And that's what's interesting about it.
Do you think that President Trump is kind of aware of all this kind of reporting before it came out? Or do you think that he's kind of... I mean, I understood before he left his office that he said he's been told lots of things and they're very interesting, but he couldn't even discuss them with his family. So presumably, if he certainly knows a lot more than what we're being presented to in that 6-page document.
Yeah, President Trump is very interesting. He has what he said. He's made some interesting statements. He he said something in his, for example, his interview with I've got to remember the name of the reporter, where it was clear that he was not being completely 100% sincere. He was not being honest. He has been briefed on this. He must have been briefed on this, but at the same time, he didn't lay out the usual line. The standard. Well, we don't know what some of them are. We think we can explain 99.99% of them, and the others, were probably just something we just don't know much about them yet, but we'll find out. Now, they've been saying that now since the since the Cutler-Twining memo of 1947. He didn't lay that out, though. He also said he did an interview with his son, actually, where he said, "Oh, Roswell, I could tell you some things about Roswell, but I can't really say it right here and now." Oh, he knows. I think he probably knows more than most presidents based on his behavior, on his language. I also think the fact that he seemed very keen to commit the United States to this particular policy, which has not been reversed by the Biden, how should I put it, sort of administration. There's something going on behind the scenes here. Even the Biden administration I think the Biden administration probably doesn't have the authority to reverse this policy now, because they seem to be losing their authority on almost everything. The defense, in other words, the U.S. defense establishment may be working outside, maybe working independently from the chain of command, which ends with the commander-in-chief being the president, which would be a very interesting situation in many, many different ways. And this has gone ahead. This has gone ahead according to President Trump's wishes. President Trump, I think, will be very pleased with what's happened here, and I do hope to hear more. I mean, he I think is in a position probably to speak about it now, because he is now receiving a lot of attention through the media and from public now, more than any other ex-president ever has. He seems to be drawing more respect than the current incumbent, Joe Biden. So I don't think it's over for Trump yet when it comes to this. He could probably say an awful lot more.
So the fact that he said, "I can tell you a lot of things about Roswell, but I can't say them to you here," and that was to his own son in an interview, that suggests then that, because back in the 90s, the US Air Force presented a number of different reports about Roswell, with like Roswell case closed and all these balloon explanations and things like that. Now, obviously, if it was case closed for Roswell back in the 90s, and President Trump is then saying, "Well, I can't tell you about Roswell, but I do know certain things," that suggests that the whole balloon thing was baloney.
Yeah, I mean, this is very obvious when you think about it, because the final declassification of Roswell supposedly took place in 1997, which is really the 50th anniversary of the thing. However, as you just said, this is that I don't believe that's the end of the story. Not least because there's other times when supposedly the case has been closed before. In fact, it was supposedly closed just after it happened the following day, when the General Ramey's office, they showed the remains of a weather balloon and said, "Well, that's what Jesse Marcel found." It was actually 31 years later that Jesse Marcel told Stanton Friedman that was not what he'd found, and he'd been forced to do this ridiculous display where he humiliated himself in front of the world's press. The final declassification, the last word, apparently, in 1997 was that this was part of Project Mogul, which was an electronic intelligence gathering device on a balloon. It was on a very big balloon, in fact, the largest unmanned balloon in history, designed to listen for the infrasonic report of atomic detonations in the Soviet Union. They knew the Russians were building the bomb, and they wanted to know when it happened, when they finally got one to work, because that's when the whole world would change. But of course, it wasn't Project Mogul. Project Mogul was just another distraction from the truth. And the truth is that it was an extraterrestrial artifact, I believe. Yeah.
Andy, do you want to come in on anything?
So basically, in essence, what you're saying, Ben, is that this report that's just come out, this 9-page, well, in fact, 6-page report, is just a great big nothing burger. But do you think there's some kind of like reason behind even that? I mean, is this kind of like soft disclosure, or is it gearing people up to, I don't know, for something else? And if so, what is that something else?
It's a good question, because ever since the end of 2017, the general public has been experiencing something unprecedented over the last the entire UFO research period, which dates back to Kenneth Arnold and Roswell in 1947. And UFOs have always been with us all through history. People have seen strange things in the sky. They've had encounters with non-human intelligent beings. However, it was from 1947 that the modern UFO era began. During that time, there's been serious government investigation, Project Sign, Project Grudge, Project Blue Book. The policy has always been official ridicule and denial, despite these projects. And that changed very suddenly in December 2017, after 70 whole years of almost a completely an unbroken policy, which was never questioned. Suddenly it changed. And what's happened since then, it's taken me a while to work this out, but it appears the general public are getting what I could only describe as a crash course in ufology. It's almost like people who consume the mainstream media are now being forced to cram 75 years of information into a mass revision session, which basically material that you and I and Neil are very, very familiar with, and other ufologists have been familiar with, and has been ignored by the mainstream, is now being accepted. So the question is, why is this? It's almost like it could be that they've said something. There's a decision been made at some point to come clean, but if they come clean in one go, what's going to happen? It'll be like a diver coming up from the seabed too quickly. If they bring a diver up too quickly, it'll actually explode because of the pressure differential. They have to do it slowly, and they have to do it very, very slowly. And it's almost like we are being acclimatized to a new kind of vision of the UFO. There's absolutely no doubt the policy of the way UFOs are portrayed by the media has radically changed. It radically changed in December 2017, and it can't. And there's no going back from there. I don't think Richard Dolan is right. You cannot put that back in the bottle. That genie's out. It's gonna everything that happens now, regardless of what it is, has to be built on that. And it does feel like they're gearing us up for something. And despite the very lackluster way this report's come out, and it is only a preliminary report, it contains certain ideas and subtext which indicates it's opening a door specifically for the right questions to be asked, the right questions that will lead people to conclude the truth. And the truth is, and it's so obvious a truth, I would bet my life on it right now, we are being visited by a non-human intelligence, and these UAPs, some of them are the artifacts of that intelligence. And it's only a matter of time, I think. Eventually, that's got to become common knowledge. Some people will panic. I mean, the mind controllers have done their job, and we have a society which is dumbed down and forced to focus on matters of no real importance and frivolities such as media scandals and gossip and soap operas and things like that. So, yeah, some people will freak out. However, this acclimatization session may minimize that.
Now, it's interesting about people freaking out, because obviously in the last year and a half, we've had the coronavirus, COVID-19 pandemic, and I'll say that in quotes, where it has freaked people out, and a lot of people have been panicking like hell, masked up to the hill, wearing almost in some of these situations spacesuits to go shopping, and now a lot of people have been rushing out for the strange injector type things that go in your arm, which supposedly will inoculate you and protect you. Maybe it does, maybe it doesn't, I don't know, but certainly people are panicked by it, and it's like almost like a deliberate panic. Now, could that somehow be connected in any way, shape or form to any kind of disclosure? Could they, for instance, the people that are doing this drip disclosure be looking at the effects of the pandemic reactions of the public and seeing how we react to that? And then consequently, you could see the psychological effect of how we react to a disclosure of aliens.
The government has employed some of the top psychologists that have ever lived for over a century. People such as the people connected to Sigmund Freud, for example, through the Tavistock Institute, the Common Purpose, the Rand Corporation, the Stanford Research Institute. There's more psychologists in government employ than any other branch of science. And everything that happens, absolutely everything, will be monitored very closely by these people to see how the public react to it. And indeed, but they will definitely be monitoring. They've definitely been monitoring how the population has reacted to the COVID pandemic. And indeed, like they do everything else, and there will be a huge amount of research being done on that. And no doubt it will be applied to the decision of where to go with these latest revelations. And these revelations are still coming. There was no sign of any slowing in this momentum, guys. And literally a few hours before we went on there, Jeremy Corbell published another video from the USS Omaha. Again, it's amateur footage taken by the sailors on deck. Not very good quality. You can distinctly see a number of red-colored objects flying above the craft and then maneuvering in various formations. I think it's probably one of the best pieces of footage so far. Now, if that keeps happening over and over again, it's setting up a contradiction and a situation that is unsustainable in its present forms. People are going to have to get to grips with this. People are going to ask the obvious question. They've been encouraged. I think this article, in a way, it encourages them to. This is certainly not fobbing people off. And people who say this is a huge disappointment, it couldn't be worse. Oh, absolutely not. This report could be a hell of a lot worse. It could simply be.
I'll tell you what else is interesting, Ben. As you're probably aware, Neil's probably aware, there's a new channel on Sky called GB News. And I think this is a really good litmus paper test as to the consciousness and psyche of the British public, because for those who've not heard of it, it's well worth looking at. GB News, Great Britain News, is a new channel that is anti-woke. So the idea is that it's not kind of far left, liberal, loony, usual BBC, ITV type news, and it actually asks proper questions and has proper guests on. Now, what's really interesting is this news channel has completely blitzed BBC News and even Sky News. Like, people are just cancelling the licenses and just going over to GB News. And what's really interesting, Ben, is some of the guests recently not only have been talking about UFOs, and there's one of their presenters, Dan Wooten, was actually arguing, get this, for the existence of UFOs. You'd never get a mainstream journalist arguing for UFOs. They also had a professor of psychology talking about the dreaded COVID, and he was talking about the psychological use of kind of like manipulation techniques used on the public. And I was just like watching with my jaw open, not because I don't know this is happening. I know this is happening. It's the fact this is now on a Sky channel, and you would never get anything like that on anything kind of BBC or woke or far left liberal.
Yeah. Oh yeah, I'm actually a big fan of GB News for other reasons, because, as you said, I don't like the political bias of the mainstream media. GB News seems to be the only exception where you get like an alternative viewpoint. It approaches things from a vaguely conservative kind of element, which is the new counterculture is conservatism, as Paul Joseph Watson said. And I do love they do. It is a breath of fresh air, and I'm a big fan of that channel. I watch it on YouTube mostly, though. However, I've not actually seen those programs, and I will go and check them out because I haven't watched every single. They as you say, it's like a 24-hour service, and they publish like so much I could never follow it all. But I was distinctly go and check out those programs and see what they are on YouTube until they get banned, obviously.
I'll tell you what they do that I've noticed mainstream programs don't. They will have, when they're having a debate, they will have two people from opposite ends and they will give them equal time. Whereas if it's something like Brexit being discussed on the BBC, they'll have like three pro-Remainers and they'll have one Brexiteer, and the three Remainers will get most of the airtime and the one Brexiteer will hardly get any airtime. That's the mainstream.
So get shouted down there,
this particular UFO debate that Dan Wooten was having, it was just a small one really, but he had one person that was kind of like pro UFO and then one person that was very kind of like anti, but it was very balanced. So when one person was making one point, another person would have enough time to respond to it. If that continues, and if GB News and hopefully other channels like it, because I hope GB News will be the start and springboard others, maybe we will start to see a shift in what you might call the mainstream. Maybe GB News will become the mainstream, and maybe they'll start actually talking about real, without the kind of woo-woo kind of silly green men in suits kind of thing, without that kind of mentality, actually talking about it properly. And then you might start getting footage from people. And what would happen if millions of people start viewing on national TV footage of actual UFOs?
Not only that, it's setting up an important. It's an important kind of cultural shift, because the world is generally becoming more whistleblower friendly and more witness friendly. For example, something happened I really didn't expect. Mr. Greenwood has come forward. Now, Mr. Greenwood was a science teacher at the Westall School in Melbourne, Australia in 1966, where there was a massive multi-witness UFO event, a CE2, that took place multiple from the school children, teachers. The science teacher there, he actually witnessed this himself, and he remained completely silent for over 50 years. But then James Fox actually included him in his documentary, Shot from Behind. He didn't want to show his face, but now he's appeared on TV, completely openly showing his face and talking about, and he hasn't changed his story. He said, yes, it was real. And it's what's interesting, Mr. Greenwood, and Andrew Greenwood, to give him his full name, I think he's come forward because of this, because of the way the media is now treating UFOs differently to how it used to. Now, if he'll do that, others will as well. This will be a chain reaction. Others are going to come forward in exactly the same way. And if there's a TV outlet, like you say, GB News, I'm very pleased to say, is enormously popular now, and is clearly there was enormous need, and people are sucking it up like people in a desert at a waterhole. You know, that's the feeling I get. It shows.
When do you think, Ben? When do you think the wokes will get it? Because in my heart of heart, I didn't think Brexit would happen, but it did. I didn't think Boris would get in, but it did. And with Boris and the Conservatives, I don't think it's a case that people voted that because they love Boris or they love the Tory party. I think they looked at the opposition. For instance, they look at Labour and they look at the wokeism, and they look at the fact that Keir Starmer was actually the person on the CPS that stopped Jimmy Savile getting persecuted and all that kind of thing. Prosecuted, sorry. And now we've got GB News and people flooding over. When do you think the far left will get it that we don't want woke?
They will completely. I think some of them will just keep doubling down until they end. But more and more, I think anyone with any brains can see the writing on the wall. And indeed, I think there's a sensation from many people already when it comes to that. On general subjects, certainly on the UFO subject, particularly, I see there's a few people such as Seth Shostak, for example, who is the leader of the SETI movement, Search for Extraterrestrial Intelligence. He's after spending his entire career ridiculing UFOs, just as much as his predecessor, Carl Sagan, did. He's now started putting out statements saying, maybe we should look into this. Maybe I'm thinking to myself, this guy, he's no less dishonest than the other skeptics. But he can see the writing on the wall. He's maneuvering himself up the starting grid before the light goes green. Others, like Professor Brian Cox, I think, will simply retire. He will not be able to face the world with that amount of humble pie. He doesn't know what humble pie is. He's so arrogant. Neil deGrasse Tyson, I think he's going to be the most interesting of all because he has been laying out the conventional skeptic line. But I think he's man enough to admit he was wrong. He seems to have a kind of geniality about him, which leads me to believe that he is. I think he's one of these people I think I could sit down and have a beer with. If it was Cox, I'd want to empty it over his head.
Well, talking of beers and things like that, I think it's time that we had a cup of tea, and whilst we're having a cup of tea, we'll watch an interview that I conducted earlier in the week with Philip Kinsella, who is a friend of ours, medium and also UFO researcher, experiencer and author. So we'll take a look at that interview with Philip, and we'll be back in about 12 minutes. Now, Philip, you've had a chance to look through this preliminary report about the UAPs. What's your initial thoughts on it when you first got hold of it?
Well, to be honest with you, I was quite disappointed. It came through as an unclassified document by the Office of the Director of National Intelligence, and it was called a preliminary assessment of the UAPs, as they call them now. It was released on the 25th of June, 2021. And notice also how the acronym of UFO has been changed now to UAP. And my feelings on that is that they're trying to take the stigmatism away from flying saucers to a more scientific understanding, which is purely psychological from whoever changed that. I was quite disappointed because it was only a 9-page document, and in this document it described more about money that needs to be funded within the military establishments to become more aware of this strange phenomenon. Now, they didn't state in that report that it was interdimensional or extraterrestrial. So that question was left floating around. And basically, the one thing that I found very disappointing was that it's just saying that, you know, that we realize there's a problem, but we still don't know what it is. Is it the, you know, the Chinese? Is it the Russians? We're not sure. It could be possible that the Senate itself is not aware that there could be some form of, you know, secret clandestine operations that's privately owned through corporate companies. In all fairness, they may not know that, but I find it very hard to believe that after all these years and since the inception of Roswell, that this is how far we've come in our investigations into the UFO phenomena, especially from a governmental perspective, as it were, or even the Senate, as it, you know, you couldn't get any higher than the Senate, really. And it kind of like doesn't open up areas of other research like Roswell. I mean, you know, we're expecting them to bring out, you know, case files about classic cases, but none of that was mentioned. So although I was very disappointed by the report, there is hope because apparently there is supposed to be another report coming forward, a bigger report. So we'll have to wait and see what comes of that. But it was actually British ufologist and author Philip Mantle who had sent me the document. You know, I kind of like know how he feels about it, but at least it's a foot in the door. At least it can start the ball rolling. But I hope it doesn't take another 70 years for them to start revealing more of this stuff, because we're just going around in circles.
It's taken them 70 years just to admit that it's not swamp gas or balloons.
And even the older reports like Project Grudge, Project Sign, Project Blue Book, I mean, those assessments were much thicker than the 9-page document that you know everyone had been given. So I'm not so sure. I think someone else is pulling the strings here. I got that feeling especially. And as we spoke earlier, what we said earlier was that isn't it amazing how here in England, on that day, on the 25th of June, when the document was released, nothing was said on the channels here in England, or at least the major channels, nothing. And that just kind of like put another nail in the coffin of, you know, of disclosure, because, you know, that's just the way the media work, the media cartel work. And we all know that. But it was damn annoying. So that's how I felt about it, you know, in sense of that.
Yeah, well, Matt Hancock's resignation has kind of dominated the headlines over these last few days, and I suspect that if the BBC or independent companies were preparing to cover it, I think they threw it onto the back page somewhere if they did at all, because
Yeah.
Matt Hancock has dominated the pages this last thing. So they're obviously more interested in what's happening on someone's CCTV camera in their private office rather than on gun cameras in the air of perhaps extraterrestrial or something out there that shouldn't be allowed to fly around our skies.
You know, the most earth-shattering revelation, and although the report wasn't earth-shattering, it is nonetheless a slight admittance from the military establishments and the Senate that there is something going on. And what do we have? We have petty, idiotic, childish, you know, events that occur that the media cartel are more interested in. But it just goes to show, doesn't it, of the control mechanism of, and it's true, it's no conspiracy with regards to how the media work. And it's reinforced my belief totally that, you know, the whole thing is manufactured. The stuff that's been put on the news is the stuff that the masters want their servants to see. And, you know, one of the most amazing things ever, this report ready to come out, nothing was covered with it at all. And I found that disgusting. And also with other key events that have happened recently in London was not even covered by either the BBC or other major channel network systems. So it, you know, here we are again. But at least we, the ufologists, the researchers, you know, at least we know, and at least we are aware of what's going on. And I think that's the important part, Neil.
Now it's interesting. A few years ago, when Luis Elizondo first started to become well known, he was interviewed by the BBC in conjunction with the fact that they'd put this out on the New York Times, I think it was, in 2017. Leslie Kean and someone else had been putting these articles out, and he was interviewed because I think that's what brought him to the news as such. And he was interviewed by the BBC, and I found this interview on one of their podcasting services. It had gone out at like 3 a.m. in the morning or something stupid like that. And it's a sort of 10-15 minute interview with him. It was one of the very first ones that I'd ever heard of him. And the BBC reporter asked him at the time about his time when he was working for the government about these things. And he said, did any of these objects ever land then? And Luis Elizondo hesitated and he said, I can't really go into that, basically, to paraphrase what he said. So, so
Yes.
in other words, he knows that they damn well have landed and they've got evidence for that because they've obviously confirmed it, but they don't want to tell you that. And they certainly haven't put that in this preliminary report because otherwise, if they know they've landed or they've got evidence they've landed, then they've got to go into a whole new field of investigation and talk about that as well.
Yes, and as I said, there we are. You know, it's a big con where the media is concerned, and they're just pulling the wool over our eyes as they do all the time. And it also brings into the fray other areas that are quite frightening of what's happening at the moment, with where we're being told one thing, but you know the those in charge, those governing the whole show, are doing their own thing. And I think a lot of people are beginning to wake up to the fact that this is wrong, there's something not right. But going back to the UFO phenomena, you know, we're very passionate about that subject matter. It's something, but at the end of the day, I was disappointed. I went through the report twice. I read all the small print and I went through everything, but you know, but okay, we can shrug our shoulders and think, well, there's going to be another report. So hopefully that next report won't be just 9 pages.
Do you think it's fair that they put that you know that they considered the possibility that it could be Russian technology or Chinese technology, but they've also said that, you know, if it was, it would be so highly advanced they would know about it anyway. Do you think they're just trying to deflect us away
Yes.
from the alien thing by
Yes.
saying that?
Yes, they are. Because if another country had this technology, you know, the world will be in a much different place, I can tell you right now. And I think they use that as a psychological weapon, not conspiracy, psychological weapon, to deflect the notion of extraterrestrial crafts. The problem is that when it is revealed to the world that UFOs exist, the next question is, who are they? What are they? Where do they come from? And what are their intentions? And that, of course, will open up a can of worms. I mean, for researchers, it will be haven. You know, it'd be wonderful if these so-called systems that conceal all this information have more than we do. And that's probably why it could be possible that many of them don't know what's going on. And that's why they've been infiltrating UFO groups, researchers' emails, their files, all these sorts of things, to try and build their own picture of secretly of what they think may be going on. So we're not really sure, but I really believe, and I've always believed, that someone somewhere knows more than we do, and they're keeping that all quiet. So yeah.
And certainly Luis Elizondo, in an interview I've recently seen of him, said that this report is only based on investigations the last year and a half. Now, my
Yes.
understanding was that Trump, if I got this correct, I mean, I may be wrong on this, but Trump, as one of his last outgoing requests, wanted them to publish everything they knew about UFOs. And obviously, if it's just a year and a half's investigations, it's not going to really cover all the absolute gems of stories that have circulated amongst the UFO community, for instance.
I don't think they know how to tell the public. I think, to be honest with you, they don't know how the public will react. And that's why there was a smokescreen, especially where the media was concerned. Remember building up to this. I mean, you know, they were talking about it on the news channels, you know, all sorts of researchers and people being brought on board to air their views. And then all of a sudden, on the actual day that happens, dead, nothing. And I thought, this is wrong. There is something seriously wrong here. But, you know, at least, as I said before, researchers are aware of this. And, you know, it's a little bit annoying. It's like a little bit of a slap in the face. But we have to wait because, as Philip Mental, because he's our publisher and mentor, and he was the one who sent me and Ronnie the document as it started to circulate very quickly around the world. He said there's more documentation to come. So we live in hope. Let's put it that way.
So we're just at the introduction pages, so to speak, I think.
Well, in 70 years' time, we might just get the first chapter, but I'd be very surprised if any of us would be around by that time. We might be
Absolutely.
seeing it from a different perspective then.
Well, I don't want to use the word "watch this space," but I think it's
Yes.
quite apt in this position, really. Okay, thank you very much indeed, Philip. And what's the next project you're working on as far as your authorship is concerned?
Thank you, Neil. Yes, I'm working on a few other projects. One of them is called Beyond the Matrix, which explores ufology in a more refined and deeper level of investigations, and throwing a whole number of other theories in the bag with regards to that. So I'm really excited. I've just finished some new articles for magazines, and I finished something else today for someone else's book that they wanted me to contribute to, which I'm very honored. So yeah, it's all cool. It's all good.
Excellent. Well, thanks very much indeed for Philip Kinsella for joining us. And now we're back with Ben and Andy. So, Ben, you took a look there of Philip Kinsella's opinions of the UAP report. Have you made any notes, anything like that you want to care to share?
Yes, Philip had some interesting insights, which I want to address right now. He tackled the very, very same thing that I did earlier on by saying that for some reason they changed the term UFO to UAP. He appeared. I think he gathered there was something a bit sinister with that. I'm not so sure. I think the reason was kind of like what I say. They are governments. They are bureaucrats. They're guys in suits. They don't wear tinfoil hats. They don't stand on the side of hillsides with Wellingtons on, with cameras pointing at the sky. No offense, Winkeech. So they just want a different word to use just to distinguish themselves from these people. Now, I personally, I don't like that kind of attitude that they have. However, I understand why they've done it. I do understand why they've done it. As I've said earlier, I think that UAP has it's really got a bit of a short half-life when it comes to this kind of social baggage, which means that you and I have culturally appropriated it. Pretty soon they're going to have to come up with something new. I thought it was ironic that UFO was originally, as I said, from the 1952 Robertson panel, introduced from the same way. Philip made another important point that there's no doubt about it, but that little preliminary report does constitute a begging letter. The UAPTF wants money. It's said it has plans for further studies, but it requires the budget. Now, I'm sure all government departments are like this. They have their share of the exchequer. They always want to be given extra money by whoever doles out the shares from taxpayers' funds, and the UAP just wants as much of that as possible. That's what you'd expect from a government bureaucracy. So it doesn't surprise me that they just want money for this, that, and the other. And some people have even claimed, not Philip, but other people have claimed that the whole UAP thing is kind of a scam just for that reason. I disagree with that. I think the UAP phenomenon is real. If government departments want to beg for money, they usually are perfectly capable of doing so with far more mundane incitements. So I think that the UAP phenomenon is real. The UAPTF does want to investigate them, but it does want definitely to get as much money as possible. Philip, I gather, is quite keen on the idea that the objects we're seeing are some kind of secret US government program, and I really do think that he may have a point there. But as we've explained earlier, if they are, then there's some ulterior motive for having them. They're not secret government programs that exist for their own purpose. They are specifically being placed in positions where they can be seen by the public and seen by military servicemen for some kind of agenda. And Philip also points out that there's been he laments the fact that this report is not that much different to what's been said for the last 75 years, and that's true. It's an odd situation actually when you see 75 years have gone past, massive amounts of effort and money have been put into a project, and very little progress has been made, and that's not really comparable with anything I can think of apart perhaps from Wales's World Cup runs. So it is a good question that he raises here. So very interesting. So thank you, Philip, for that. For your input on that.
And if anyone notices the quality of Ben's mic has changed since part one, we noticed that Ben's microphone wasn't engaged correctly, so we've managed to fix that, and hopefully we'll hear less of Liberace and more of Ben, which is sounding great anyway at the minute, so that's cool. Now, one of the things I read on a BBC website was that this report was the public version, but there's one that's actually being handed out privately, which is more kind of information. And who's that been handed to, Ben?
It's been handed to the Senate Intelligence Committee and the Senate Armed Services Committees. These two committees have been at the forefront of the UAPTF analysis. Now, this is no secret that they have, the UAPTF includes something that's been called the Annex. Now, this is a series of reports that are classified that will not be released to the public, and the senators are now examining those. Now, the thing about this is, of course, the question is, are we ever going to find out what's in this classified annex? Well, obviously, somebody from those committees leaked the preview to the New York Times. When this happened, I was inclined to take it seriously because the New York Times has a good track record for this sort of thing. Now, obviously, what I'd like to see happen is some information from the classified annex also being leaked to the New York Times. If this happens, I think it's much less likely because no one knows exactly who leaked the preliminary reports a few weeks ago. That's the public report. Obviously, it's just a preview. Whoever it was, I think it might have been Marco Rubio, actually the chairman of the Intelligence Committee. It's not a serious offense. However, leaking a classified document to the media is a far more serious offense. If the person is caught, they'll be dealt with much more severely. However, I believe there's a climate is changing now. There's a transformation in the way whistleblowers, I think, are going to be treated in the future. So if someone within those committees does leak some of the classified documents, I suspect they will be treated with more mitigation than they would have done perhaps a few years ago. Whether this will incite some of them to do it, I don't know. I mean, I'd like that to happen, actually, because I personally will be signing the petition and all the other things and putting money into the crowdfunding for their defense if that actually happens.
What do you think, Ben, about the Gary McKinnon thing where he half downloaded a UFO picture way back in 2000, I think it was?
Yeah, this was very interesting. This is a hacker, a guy from Scotland who hacked into the Department of Defense computers and NASA. I believe he hacked NASA as well and discovered some really, really fascinating things, which include elements to do with possible ET collaboration and or the secret space program. He was treated, he was in very, very serious trouble. It was possible he was going to get extradited to the United States. He wasn't in the end. His extradition was blocked to his relief. Then, even better, he wasn't even prosecuted for the offenses in this country. He was essentially pardoned. I think no doubt he will be watching this with enormous interest. I do suspect that what he was actually hacking into was some kind of part of the classified projects that are going on in this world to do with UFOs and or the secret space program. And with this change, this sea change in the way these things are presented, I mean, I would hope that if anyone has that information, they'll say, what the hell? I'll just tell everyone. I'll end up on Tucker Carlson's show and, worse than that, maybe get some community service. Whereas previously, it was a throw away the key situation. Things have changed. I think at some point, actually, there's going to be some kind of Truth and Reconciliation Commission. Richard Dolan and Bryce Zabel foresee in their book ADR to Disclosure there'll be some kind of Truth and Reconciliation Commission. And I think that is going to be necessary. We're going to need something like that, which as soon as this sea change takes place and people within the secret projects to do with ETs and or secret space program are relieved of their oaths, their non-disclosure agreements are cancelled, things like that, then you're going to have an absolute avalanche of information. And I think we're already in the beginning process of that now. I think what we really need now is a common law precedent. Just one common law precedent is all that's necessary. And by that, I mean just one acquittal or one very mitigated conviction. In other words, a very light sentence. Once that happens, you have a common law precedent which will be applied to other cases. And I think that might be the first snowflake in the avalanche. Very often you find that once one little thing happens, more and more of it follows. It's almost like you reach a critical mass. So that's what I hope will happen. So
how close we are to that point, I don't know. We're definitely heading in the right direction.
Now, it's interesting. Luis Elizondo has been the guy that's been giving out all the interviews over the last sort of 6 months with the build up to this. He's been like the flavour of the month UFO guy to go to. And Stephen Greer seems to have fallen off the map a little bit. And you talked about the disclosure thing and people coming forward. And he was doing that 20 years ago, assembling all these people for the Disclosure Project. What do you think is going through his mind at the moment with this kind of release of information?
Greer, well, on the subject of Greer or Elizondo?
Greer.
Greer, I think, is clearly annoyed that disclosure is no longer about him. Now, he's got every right to be proud of what he's done. He's been doing this for like 30 years, like I said. However, I think he's got to put this aside and realize that, yes, he has played a vital role in this, but he's not entitled to have this whole thing revolve around him. This issue has never been one that revolves entirely around him. And he's just got to, I think he's got to put a lid on his ego a little bit, quite frankly, because he said some ridiculous things lately. He's accused several people. He's accused Lou Elizondo of being a shill, which is not exactly original. Not just suggested it, he's actually accused him. What's more, he's also made a very veiled threat to Danny Sheehan, who's currently Elizondo's lawyer, just basically saying, you have to get him to confess, otherwise you're cast out of the family plot. Now, Danny Sheehan has been the solicitor for the Disclosure Project since 1993. So a very, very long time, almost 30 years. But I do hope Danny does the right thing and not just give in to what essentially a very, I think sounds, reading between the lines, is quite spiteful attack by Greer. Lou Elizondo himself, of course, he was an army intelligence officer. We know that. I know there's loads of people you get the refrain that comes up again and again. He's a shill, Ben. He's a shill. Can't you see it? Now, as I said earlier, I repeat what I've said before. We should be on our guard against possible disinformation. Did I repeat this before, or was it on another live stream I did? I can't remember. But basically, there was a possibility that we're dealing with some kind of massive double bluff here. That this could be some kind of prelude to, I think, some deception on the part of the government regarding the roles of ETs, possibly a fake disclosure. Now, the Carol Rosin, for example, said that in order to create a dictatorial world government, the last card that would be played to create it would be evil aliens threatening the Earth. And the government will say, well, we need a global state of emergency to deal with this alien threat. Temporary, of course. And then because Werner von Braun, who gave Carol Rosin this information, she said that in 1975, he said the Cold War would be over within a decade. Well, you could say that that's actually true according to some standards, because that was when Gorbachev got into power in the Soviet Union and really everything wound down after that. But then he said, then Werner von Braun apparently predicted terrorist threat, 9/11, things like that came after it.
And an asteroid as well.
The asteroid. Is it possible we're skipping the asteroids and going straight for the alien threat? This is something we've got to...
Ben, we've had the asteroid threat. I don't know. I mean, but it was kind of a small thing. They said that there was something that could wipe out Earth, coming quite close to Earth.
Maybe, yeah. Maybe they did play that card a little bit, yeah.
They did.
However, we need to be on our guard against that sort of thing. And there's many, many people in this movement, in this community, who are really going along with a paradigm of prevention by assuming that Elizondo is some nasty infiltrator come to spread discord within the UFO community and pave the way for the takeover, the final takeover by the Illuminati when the alien threat comes along. Now, the people saying this, it's actually it's the people I would expect, very predictable, the kind of names that come up when this sort of... when this issue comes along. It tends to be the kind of people who accuse everyone else of being shills all the time, including me, of course. People have accused me of that as well. And although we must be careful, we mustn't be naive here. We must realize that some kind of false flag attack, some kind of disinformation is certainly possible on the cards. What if something different is happening? What if these are real aliens and the people behind the truth embargo are no longer in control of this flow of information? In other words, what if there is a secret chain of command operating outside the official one? Because Joe Biden, the supposed president of the United States, he's been cagey to the point of being I'd say, repulsed by this whole issue. When he was asked a question by a member of the audience at a press conference a couple of weeks ago, he said, "Oh, the subject of President Obama mentioned this." He said, "Oh, ask him again," and he walked off. So it seems that he seems very nervous about this sort of thing. Kamala Harris hasn't said anything. Nancy Pelosi hasn't said anything about this. It all seems to be reporters. It's people within the command, within the military, and within the legislature, within the legislation, the legislative branch of government, who are focusing off. The executive has been completely silent on this matter, apart from Jen Psaki, the press secretary. Now, if this is the case, we mustn't miss this opportunity. If this is if that is actually what I've just said is actually happening, then this means that these are real extraterrestrials. And at some point, when the crash course has finally reached its perigee, we will be given the full truth. That is the big D disclosure. Now, that would be an opportunity we'd be loath to miss, which means I think we should be treading a careful path between, oh my God, everyone's a shill and it's all a big fix-up, to complete naivety. In other words, it's the truth, everything's going to be fine. I mean, that might not be good for some people's egos, might not be able to cope with that particular balance, but mine can. So we'll see. But
I was going to say, if you think about the past sort of few years where we've had things trickling through into the mainstream, just in the sense of normal science and astronomy, where they've been finding exoplanets outside of solar system, and these ones are possibly sustainable to life. It's almost like they're laying the seeds and the foundations for giving us the kindergarten treatment for the big A that will come along later on.
Two events in particular, I think, fit right in with exactly what you said. One is Oumuamua. This is an interstellar object that passed through the solar system in 2017. There's a book called Extraterrestrial by Professor A.V. Loeb. A.V. Loeb was the astronomer who discovered it and dealt with this. He has very bravely stuck his neck out and staked his reputation on this being some kind of artificial object. Another is Mars, that favorite of when it comes to alien life. The latest Perseverance probe on Mars and the Ingenuity helicopter are very, very interesting, because this is by far the most sophisticated Martian mission in history, which includes features that have never happened before on Mars, such as motion picture. That's never been done on another planet before, except the moon. Oh, Marcus Allen will say, no, the others will say no. But yeah, it's never been done on another planet other than Earth. There's motion pictures, sound recording. We've actually heard the sound of Martian wind. We're the first people ever to hear that outside the secret space program. So that's remarkable. There's this Zhurong rover as well, which is a Chinese craft, which is very similar to Perseverance. I think I wouldn't be surprised if they find life on Mars. I say find, they announce they've discovered a life on Mars. Of course, I think they already know there's life there. It'll probably be just some kind of single-celled organism, an amoeba of some kind. However, it will make people's eyes point in the right direction. It'll keep people's blinkers focused in the direction they want. That is the direction which is leading to a big D disclosure with minimized public panic. It all, as you said, Neil, it all plants the right seeds.
Why haven't they given us video footage previously of Mars and Moon, etc.?
They haven't had the equipment to transmit it. It requires a lot to transmit motion pictures over such a great distance is very difficult. It requires very compressed digital data, a very powerful transmitter and things. There's never been taken to another planet before. All we've had before is still pictures. So this is something completely new. And same with the sound recording. We've had audio recording on Mars for the first time ever. But I mean, the reason I think they're using these technologies now is for that purpose, to give people experience of Mars that's never been had before, images and sounds and other things from Mars they've never had before, because they're going to admit there's life there. I think they're really going to admit there's life there at some point. That's really going to galvanize people. And it's going to set this seed. If life is on Mars, especially if they can prove it evolved independently from Earth, it wasn't just carried there by panspermia. In other words, it has different kinds of thing from DNA, which is different to Earth DNA. That will be really amazing. That's going to be hard for the skeptics to explain. Two planets right next to each other, both evolve life independently. Some will, they'll push coincidence theory as far as they can, but most people will not accept that as coincidence.
Mm. And they're tweaking these things. I mean, we're hearing lots about Mars. If you go onto YouTube, you find so much stuff about Elon Musk's, missions to Mars and things like that. It's almost like a 1950s science fiction movie, isn't it? George Powell type of thing. And we're being kind of mind prepped for it. Within the next 30 years at least, we're supposedly going to have a mission to Mars, and so we're being kind of Flash Gordonized for this whole thing, really, aren't we?
Jeff, Flash Gordonized. Yeah, that's an interesting way to put it. I mean, it's possible they want to declassify the kind of technology that's behind the secret space program. I know when we talked to Jarrah White about this, he believed it was perfectly possible to have a manned mission to Mars with conventional rockets and things like that. Others have said that's not possible because of radiation dangers and things like that, and mechanical problems. But with an anti-gravity craft, it would take the risks and the difficulties of such a journey, and it would shrink them to a fraction of what they would otherwise be. So, is it possible if this somehow is declassified, then the first manned mission to Mars will be on an anti-gravity craft? The thing is, if they declassify anti-gravity, they're going to have to declassify free energy. If they declassify free energy, that's intimately connected to the UFO issue. Absolutely intimately connected. I think that will be very, very good situation, because then really the deep state, Illuminati, whatever you want to call them, have totally lost. They can never ever have a new world order with those things in public view. Never. Our use of fossil fuels, our belief that we're like a pale blue dot, this tiny little oasis of life in an infinite cosmic desert. These things I consider quintessential to their hold over us, financially, economically, psychologically, culturally, in every way possible. You take that away, and there will be no new world order. So I think we can celebrate if that happens.
I hope it does happen, Ben. But the problem is, what if this whole COVID situation is part of some kind of Illuminati New World Order? So, for instance, since 9/11, we've had nothing but the Patriot Act and things sapping away freedoms and liberties. Along comes COVID, 20 years later, and again we've got even the right to protest. So we've got this bill that the UK wants to draw up to stop people protesting peacefully. We've got the idea of COVID passports. They've said, oh no, we're not having COVID passports, but at the same time 8 COVID passport trials were being done. Now they're talking about mandatory vaccines. Some companies have actually started mandatory vaccines. People are being censored left, right and center, so you can't talk about certain things and you'll be taken off social media. And I'm kind of like wondering, what if the dark cabal behind all of this are actually in cahoots with some kind of evil dark force, and this evil dark force are basically saying you need a new world order and you need to implement it now, ready for our return. So they've gone, okay, COVID passports, COVID this, COVID that, shut down protests and all sorts.
That's precisely what they're trying. That's precisely what I don't know. This is going on YouTube, isn't it?
Yeah.
This is what the C word. Oh, well, you've already said it anyway, Andy. Yeah. So it makes the COVID-19 is all about. See, in 2016, there was a very interesting year because the world fell into a sense of chaos from the Illuminati point of view. They completely lost control. 2 things happened which they really didn't intend: Brexit and President Trump. Those 2 things were never meant to happen. I don't care. I've heard people shout at me, Ben, no, it's all part of the plan. It's all part of the conspiracy. No, it's not. It was not meant to happen. They panicked. This has terrified them, and the powers that shouldn't be, the powers that were, whatever you want to call them, they want a retaliatory strike. They want to do something to prevent something like 2016 ever happening again, and they have done that in several forms. Firstly, they forced President Trump out of office last year. Now at the same time, of course, they brought out this disease. Now the disease is, as you just said, is intended. It's simply their 2016. This is their riposte to 2016. For all the reasons you just said, it gives the government enormous power to protect us. People would never accept vaccine passports. They'd never accept mandatory jabs. They'd never accept any of these things. If the government just came and said, would you like them? Do you fancy these things? People would say no. What they've done is they've said, well, these things are necessary to protect you from this danger. We, the government, are your saviors. We're here to look after you. These things, these policies which you want to introduce, will protect you from these things. David Icke puts it very well: problem, reaction, solution. You create the problem, get this reaction, then offer the solution.
It's also interesting that all these little terrorist atrocities have all gone a little bit quiet of late in the last 2 or 3 years.
They're not really needed any. They're not needed at the moment.
No vans going across big bridges, no suicide bombers and things like that at pop concerts and things like that, because the threat is much bigger now.
There's been a few small-scale ones, for example, in Germany the other day, but that's because I think they were real. They're not government. They're not government issue, and that is why. That's why exactly they're not needed anymore. They're not needed at the moment. They may be needed again at some point in the future.
Where does Q fit in with all this? Because I had high hopes for QAnon, but I there's a gut feeling. I just thought, I just can't see it happening. This whole thing about Biden being arrested and all the Illuminati taken down, I just thought it's nice, but I think it's slightly woolly.
Sadly, I think Q, whoever they are, he, she, or they, may well not be alive anymore, or they may be in prison. Because obviously, Joe Biden ascending to the White House was not part of the plan. It's obvious. I know some people even claim, "Oh no, Joe Biden's he's a white hat." Now, come on, you pushed this too far. It was not part of the plan. The plan didn't work. That doesn't mean all hope is lost. President Trump is very clearly still in the public eye. He's still fighting fit. He's joined Rumble, the social media site Rumble, and his account there has already surpassed, on an alternative site, has surpassed Joe Biden's Twitter, his YouTube, and his Facebook completely. Joe Biden, the supposed most popular president in history, for whom was the famous 50-50 split in American politics ended so that people were all voting for him. They love him. He's been forgotten. So because the plan failed doesn't mean that there's not another plan that can work. The fact that Trump is so popular, he's going out and about, he's all over the place. His own policy to bring out the UAPTF has not been reversed. The UAPTF still exists. The Senate committees are still in control of that situation. The media is still, some of the media outlets are still talking about it. That train is still on its tracks. So, despite the ridiculous election and Joe Biden situation, I still feel hopeful. We'll see what happens anyway.
Well, I just keep hoping whoever is the person polishing the stairs of Air Force One keeps polishing them. One last word on Luis Elizondo. I mentioned it in the interview with Philip Kinsella, where he was interviewed back in 2017 when this Nimitz footage was first coming to our awareness. And he was asked by the BBC reporter, have any of these objects ever landed? And he said, I can't go into that. What's your take on that?
Elizondo has done this a couple of times. He's also made a similar comment regarding the physical debris that Bigelow Aerospace was involved in, was contracted to analyze. This is the same physical debris that Andrew Bralalia managed to get a few pages of a 144-page document from through the Freedom of Information Act. The same material that Dr. Irena Scott talks about was analyzed at the Battelle Memorial Institute. So it's obviously something real. It has remarkable properties. They haven't said where it comes from. They've just said where it hasn't come from and leave it. By the process of elimination, it's very obvious. It's just like the UAPs themselves. You just through the process of elimination, they're essentially saying where it did come from. Elizondo, again, he was very. He obviously didn't like the fact that he wasn't allowed to say this. Obviously, it's part of his security classification. He's not allowed to release classified information, and you can see he didn't like that. He was dropping hints for that reason. Again, I hope the situation can arise when he will speak out about this. I know that he's quit. He quit the To the Stars Academy. Him and Chris Mellon both left with the other guy. I've got the third guy who left, which has been a bit of a blow because basically those guys have been the workhorses of the TTSA. But apparently they're still on good terms with Tom DeLonge. But Elizondo actually said, I want to leave TTSA because they're basically media oriented, not science orientated, and they were imposing too many restrictions on what he could say through their own policies, which is why he quit. Lewis, he's even talking about running for office. He's sort of maybe becoming a congressman or something, or a senator. Wow. So I think there's no evidence. There's certainly not enough evidence to yell, "Oh, he's a shill! I'm absolutely certain of it. Condemn him, lock him up," and all the things that so many the usual suspects are yelling at him right now. I think we should give the man a chance.
And we got another 6 months for another report to come out?
They're at least every 6 months. I mean, Steve Bassett he released something very interesting, Stephen Bassett, on the Paradigm Research Group. If you ever sign up to his newsletter, it's worth doing. He released something which said that he believes that there's going to be more information coming out on July the 12th. And I'm looking forward to that because I'm interviewing him on the 26th. Excellent. So hopefully by then we will know about that.
Okay. Right. Well, we'll draw this to a close. Thank you very much indeed to Ben Emlyn-Jones for joining us on this Paranormal Peep Show special. And if you just want to tell us about your own shows, Ben, and your own website so people can find out more about you if they don't already know about you.
Hospital Porters Against the New World Order, HPANWO, that's my website. I've also written a book, Roswell Rising, a novel of disclosure, and it's 2 sequels. It's a trilogy. Now, this book is basically about the subjects that you've just been hearing about. But I asked myself the question, what if we got the truth instead of lies? And that question led to a thought experiment, a scenario, and eventually a story, which I put into a book. So if you like this show, you'll love this book. £10 only. So check that out. It's on all the outlets. So
fantastic.
Okay. Andy, anything you want to promote?
Cool. Just tuned in events. We're not sure what we're doing about the event situation locally. We might wait to see. I think Boris probably will have to open things up. I don't think the public, because the London marches are getting bigger and bigger and bigger. These are the anti-lockdown marches. And they're up to probably about 1 million people now, which the BBC doesn't cover. But
apparently they just can't hear them at the front door.
Yeah.
Can they?
I would urge everybody to switch off from mainstream media, switch off from BBC News, switch off from ITV News and Channel 4 News, and watch GB News. That's where it's at.
Also, I would second that. And also, as I said before, the UK column news as well, found on their website, ukcolumnnews, probably .com or .co.uk. They were taken off YouTube, which is a sign that they must be saying something interesting.
Yeah, it is. Yeah.
So, those as well. They're more sort of political. They're not sort of paranormal, but still interesting if you're interested in alternative stuff. Yep. Anyway, thank you very much once again to Ben Emlyn-Jones, and we wish you well with your future projects, Ben, and your shows and your Stephen Bassett interview as well. And you can join us in the end of July for the normal run of the Paranormal UK radio network, which is our Paranormal Peep Show is aired on, and we'll be talking to Mark Johnson, who is one of the co-hosts of the Paranormal UK radio show with Irene Allen. So join us then, but thanks for joining us now.
Thanks, guys. Thanks for having me on. Thanks for listening, everyone.
Bye-bye.